Good morning. Yesterday, the first working day of President Trump, saw an action being taken that has great implications for Canada. It has also great implications for India. And it was that the President signed an executive order stating that America is withdrawing from the much wanted, much patronized TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. This agreement, the pet agreement of President Obama, sought to ensure a Trans-Pacific partnership of 12 countries, which would have created major issues for India, because that market would have had certain restrictions or certain constraints for the Indian produce. And Canada would have definite benefits because it would have opened its market to the Pacific Rim countries, especially South Korea and Japan. I suppose you recollect my statement at that time that TPP, though good, would be better served in case we have bilateral relationship with those countries. Because a multilateral relationship is dependent on what the big brother does. Canada already had a very, very restrictive trade because it was 87% dependent on USA. Now with TPP gone and NAFTA hanging in balance, Canada has to ensure its protection. How does it hedge its issues? And then we cannot ignore another danger looming large on us, and that's the Chinese dragon indirectly trying to impact, influence, and interfere in our Canadian military defense mechanism and thereby control Canada's future. Have you thought of that? Well, the last act of the Harper government was to refuse the Chinese takeover of a Montreal firm, ONET. ONET is the largest supplier of equipment to the defense of Canada, the largest software supplier, the computer supplier, the hardware supplier, and other equipment. And Chinese had desired to take over this. Looking at the objections by CSIS, the intelligence community, the economic realities, the Harper government banned this takeover. 2 days back, Prime Minister Trudeau was prevailed upon to give it the permission that Revo order restraining the takeover is revoked, and Chinese are welcome to take over this Montreal firm. The plea taken in the foreign investment is welcome. We have forgotten that armies always follow the traders. What happened with the East India Company? And in today's world, diplomacy and trade are much more important than an army. But you are giving away something which is your own on a platter to the others, unmindful of the consequences. So Canada is all of a sudden has to take the decision of approaching and hedging its bets so that it's not caught in the spider web It's undeniable that Canada has been dependent for such a long time on USA and cannot in foreseeable future get rid of that reality. 37 US states have preponderant trade with Canada. 37 US states out of the 50 states, they are bordering us. Now with those 37 states exporting to Canada and Canada exporting 87% of the products to USA, has to hedge its bets so that the NAFTA revocation does not harm it. And that's why I have always been saying that Canada should have been sensible enough to take a step before the NAFTA is even scheduled to be discussed. It should unilaterally have said, okay, we are reverting to the old treaty, which still is current but is not being enforced, of a bilateral trade between Canada and USA. That trade agreement was put in cold storage when NAFTA was signed. Now it's the time to revive that. And I'm sure US would not be averse to reviving that, because that is also in the interest of USA. In case Canada had not been involved in NAFTA, then President Trump would have yesterday signed 2 executive orders cancelling TPP and NAFTA. The fact that the 37 states are having trade with Canada was a counterweight which has been responsible for not removing NAFTA right away. But hey, the fate is hanging in balance. Now what should Canada do? Canada should right away start talking to US and presenting the case, A, of the dairy farming industry. That's most important. NAFTA was protected. You know, we have been talking of the auto industry all the time for the simple reason that auto industry is more visible. But the revenue earned by the dairy industry is much more than the revenue earned by the auto industry. That is one issue. And that is always ignored in the view of the facts of the presence of the auto industry. Auto industry is important, I don't deny it. Traditionally, Ontario has been dependent on auto industry. But auto industry slowly and steadily is also on the way out with the coming in of the artificial intelligence and other vehicles, and because of the pollution issues and because of the urbanization sprawl and the traffic gridlocks. Ultimately, we will have to go to the mass rapid transits. And a mass rapid transit will be the death of the auto industry. So one way or the other, the auto industry has got to go. Then the point rises, if case auto industry has to go, why not at least try to save those industries which A, bring us more revenue, B, they affect a vast majority of the Canadians in the dairy industry. The farming people, the dairy farmers, that's most important, the livestock industry, the feed, the dairy feed. Not only I'm talking about the farmers, but the feed manufacturers, the vet industry. That's it. If you keep on saying the spin-off, you will see how important it is. The mutton. I mean, along with the dairy comes the meat industry. So that is very well connected and we cannot ignore it. And Canada's first thought should be about that. The secondly, we have got to step up our efforts of signing agreements with the Pacific Rim countries. I said about 3 months back that Canada must sign agreement with at least two economic giants of Far East, that is Japan and South Korea. We do not have any agreements with them as most favored nation, MFN agreement. That should have been the first thing to be done. And when you want to sign an MFN, you need a good diplomatic relations, and we have good diplomatic relations. We made a mistake this time when the Prime Minister Trudeau sent John McCallum as ambassador to China. Now, McCallum is not a sinologist and he's not a diplomat, let's be very clear. The way he handled immigration, we have seen it. We should have sent a guy who is expert in the Sino culture, the Chinese way of diplomacy, and the Pacific mind, the person who is culturally sensitive. You know, unfortunately, we often think that diplomatic assignments should be given to the favored people. No, they should be given to the competent people. You see, had there been a better ambassador, he would have advised against this revision of the earlier Harper order, because he would have understood the implications of that. Now imagine a request was made about 5 years back. Harper government took action 2 years back. And if the Chinese are persisting with that, there must be a reason for that. Earlier, the potash was taken over by the Chinese. We murmured, but we gave in. We have been grumbling and we have been giving in to them. With the result that economically the day is not far off, that if this trend continues unabated, that Canada would have to be serving two economic masters, USA and China. And caught in a pincer movement is never good for any economy. Now comes the state of India. How does TPP affect India? You see, as I said earlier, the TPP had certain provisions which were very constraining towards trade with India, with the Pacific, had TPP gone into it. Now, this is a golden opportunity for India to immediately jack up its operations. India has been very sensible in one way, that they have been leaning toward Japan since Modi came in power. And as was evident from my articles earlier and my comments earlier, as a matter of fact, Modi, Abe, Putin axis could shore up Indian economy a great deal. Japan is very averse to China. Let's be very clear about that. South Korea is afraid of China because China is supporting North Korea. Now these two big powerhouses would be extremely happy to deal with India on a much better and higher platform. What's happening is we have good relations, but we don't need good relations. We need better than the best relations. And the first thing India should do is to sign MFN agreements with them, then sign further agreements as bilateral agreements leading to the free trade and free movement of goods and services, not men, goods and services. At present, the export of the services from India to Japan and South Korea is nil. Any quantum jump above nil would be preferable. And the sooner it's done, the better it would be. The second part, apart from signing the agreement, we also have got to deal with them on the basis of arms industry. Now as TPP is gone and Trump is going to ask them to pay up South Korea and Japan for defense, this is a high time for the defense industry in India to make a foray into these two very opulent, very affluent markets. And you see, the saying is, the early bird gets the worm. Can India be an early bird? That is yet to be seen. But in case it is, the worm is there ready to be picked up. And that worm has a plenty of economic wherewithal that can sustain and regenerate and rejuvenate Indian economy. So this signing of TPP would have been a problem for them. Now this action of President Trump in withdrawing from TPP is a golden opportunity for India to expand, enhance and consolidate its economic forces. For Canada, it's an opportunity to let go of the inhibitions, deal with USA on a bilateral issue, and then also have bilateral relations with the Pacific Rim countries, at the same time being very clear that selling away your valued assets is no way of long-term economic solution. They might be palliative immediately, but we should be careful in what sort of acquisition are we agreeing to. This is an opportunity and a danger. Let's see whether we catch the opportunity and avoid the danger, or we sink into the pitfall that might be created by our ineptness and inefficiency. Thank you.